High ratings and millions of weekly viewers couldn't save Stargate Atlantis. Here's why Syfy cancelled it, and how one heroic Hail Mary almost brought it back. Executive producer and showrunner Joseph Malozzi was upfront about the core reasoning for the cancellation of Stargate Atlantis in a blog post published on August 21, 2008, right after the news broke. It was confirmed that the fifth and then current season would be the final one, despite strong metrics for Season 5. Specifically, he pointed out rising production costs that were impossible to overcome. It's not exactly surprising that money was the heart of the show's demise, but it was disappointing for fans nonetheless. While the exact costing of making Stargate Atlantis isn't public knowledge, The Hollywood Reporter has confirmed that Stargate SG-1 cost $2.2 million per episode. And when actor Robert Carlyle sat down with The Telegraph to discuss the 2009 spin-off series Stargate Universe, he said that a single episode was also in the $2 million range. It's safe to assume that Stargate Atlantis was in the same ballpark in terms of budget, and this was clearly too much money to justify during a financial crisis. But that's not the end of the story. There was actually a ton of factors at play that led to the fall of Atlantis. One of the biggest factors in the cancellation of Stargate Atlantis is a little dry, but bear with us: the strength of the Canadian dollar against the United States dollar.
It's a Canadian thing, a little touchy about it.
In his blog post confirming that the show was done, Joseph Malozzi specifically mentioned the US dollar's steep decline. To better understand how this impacted the show, let's consider how the exchange rate of both dollars changed over the course of the production period. As documented by James Hoare for The Companion, when Stargate Atlantis began production, $1 Canadian was equivalent to about 79 United States cents. This gap had tightened by 2008, with $1 Canadian now the equivalent of roughly 94 US cents. Why was Stargate Atlantis so impacted by this? Well, the show was filmed in Canada, and when converting the budget into Canadian dollars, it equated to more money in the early years. So, as the difference between the $2 lessened, it actually meant the series would have less money per episode than before, unless there was a budget increase to account for the shifting exchange rate. It certainly didn't help that MGM, the studio that owned the franchise, was going through financial difficulty around the time of the cancellation. The company filed for bankruptcy in October 2010, and a restructuring began, with creditors entrusting the founders of Spyglass Entertainment to steady the ship. In the years leading up to the filing, many highly anticipated projects stalled.
Look, this is not their normal form of bonding. I mean, it'll take them some time to adapt, to figure out how to function within the new parameters.
How much time?
Well, I mean, I hate to speculate.
Finally, in 2022, Amazon purchased MGM and its library in a big $8.5 billion deal. That was great news for Prime Video subscribers, but came far too late to save Stargate Atlantis. MGM wasn't the only company going through big changes at the time. In 2009, the Syfy channel rebranded to Syfy. As part of the rebrand, the content focus shifted. Instead of a lineup that included 2 Stargate shows and Battlestar Galactica, the channel would now lean more into fantasy and supernatural series like Merlin and Being Human, and a lot of fans weren't thrilled with the shift.
It's a really good show.
Stargate's better.
While science fiction still featured, spacefaring adventure stories were no longer the main focus. Sure, the company could have taken on the cost of Stargate Atlantis and kept it going after the rebrand, but that was never a real possibility in the financial climate of the day. The arrangement for Stargate SG-1 episodes was that MGM covered 2/3 of the costs and left the rest for Syfy. So it would have been a big increase in outlay for the channel even without the crisis. Execs opted to cancel Stargate Atlantis and focus on other properties that were likely deemed more profitable in the changing media landscape. Another element that seemingly contributed to the eventual cancellation of Stargate Atlantis was the ending of Stargate SG-1 in 2007 after 10 seasons. What does that have to do with anything? Well, according to The Hollywood Reporter, SG-1 and Atlantis share both a production crew and sound stages, meaning they likely split the costs of these between the 2 shows.
Apparently, it's also an elevator.
By having the outlay, more of the budget could go toward making the episodes great. It was an arrangement that created more wiggle room for the creators and producers. When SG-1 ended, it likely meant the entirety of the money for sound stages and the crew was on the shoulders of Atlantis. Joseph Malozzi wrote about rising production costs in his August 21, 2008 blog post, and taking on the other half of the monetary obligation for a crew and the sound stages seemingly contributed to that. Ironically, when Stargate Universe was greenlit and went into production in 2009, it was shot on the same sound stages at the Bridge Studios in British Columbia. But by the time the spin-off premiered in October 2009, the Great Recession was over, and the costs of the sound stages were easier to justify. Speaking of Stargate Universe, some Stargate fans blame the 2009 series for the cancellation of Atlantis, claiming that Atlantis was binned so those resources could go toward a new entry in the Stargate timeline. Given the timing of the new spin-off, Atlantis was cancelled in 2008 and Universe came out the following year. It's a fair assumption to make, but is there any truth to it? Well, even though the spin-off isn't directly responsible for the demise of Atlantis, it's true that executives pulled the plug on that show knowing that they had another Stargate show in the pipeline. When Universe was cancelled in 2011, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Syfy Digital Craig Engler spoke to Gateworld about all things Stargate. Most of the interview focused on why Universe ended, but Engler also opened up about Atlantis being dropped, confirming that the existence of the spin-off made the decision easier. He said, "When MGM and Syfy mutually decided to bring Stargate Atlantis to an end after 5 seasons, they did so knowing they'd transition to a new show in the franchise, Stargate Universe." Stargate Atlantis had strong ratings, typically outperforming other shows on the Syfy channel. Like many shows, viewership waned over time, but even in the 4th season, the series averaged 1.8 million viewers, which was 500,000 more than other shows on the channel. The final episode of the series garnered 2.02 million viewers, with the 5th season averaging 2.1 million viewers across the board. In addition to strong viewer numbers in comparison to other shows on the network, Stargate Atlantis showed no signs of being past its prime in its later seasons. Of the show's top 5 episodes based on IMDb ratings, 4 of them are in the final 2 seasons of the series. So what gives? Why did the powers that be decide it was time to end Atlantis when ratings were better than average? Well, according to Craig Engler of Syfy Digital, a rise in viewership near the end of a series isn't actually unusual. As much as it makes for good reading, this uptick in ratings near the end of Atlantis was never going to save the show, although it wasn't for lack of trying on behalf of everyone involved. In fact, everything was mapped out to continue the show in some way or another. All it needed was for the right chevrons to lock into place. When Stargate Atlantis was cancelled, MGM and Syfy confirmed that Atlantis would live on as a film. In a press release, executive producers and creators Robert C. Cooper and Brad Wright said that they were excited to tell Atlantis stories on a bigger canvas with the movie, which was going to be released on DVD by MGM. It had worked for Stargate SG-1, and the assumption was that a straight-to-DVD Atlantis movie would also do well.
This is incredible. It is. I sense a but.
Speaking to Gateworld shortly after the cancellation of Stargate Atlantis in 2008, Brad Wright confirmed that the idea of making an Atlantis movie was factored into discussions about the show's renewal. Back then, the straight-to-DVD movie market was still in good shape, so when the creative team sat down with MGM and Syfy, a compromise was reached. Wright said, "We decided to basically pull the trigger on movies sooner rather than later, while Atlantis was still doing well. It was a mutual thing. I honestly have neither the desire nor the inclination to blame anybody, because this is a wonderful thing to be able to continue." Sadly, the film, which was going to be called Stargate Extinction, never came to pass. The media landscape was changing yet again, and the powers that be decided that going down the direct-to-DVD route was no longer a smart move.
Showrunner Joseph Malozzi told Gateworld in 2022,
Essentially, the bottom had fallen out, and MGM decided to shelve the production on the movie.
Malozzi and the rest of the creative team accepted the end of Stargate Atlantis, graciously believing that a film was on the horizon.
In fact, they were ready for all eventualities. If by some miracle the show was renewed, they were prepared to convert the movie into a 2-part opening for the 6th season. The story would have seen the team traveling through time and getting lost in a different galaxy, where they run into a future, malicious version of Todd the Wraith.
You intend to hold me responsible?
All I know is that everything went sideways, the way it always does when you're involved. Are you gonna tell me that's a coincidence?
In June 2024, Malozzi made a long X-post showing a short synopsis for each of the 20 episodes that had been mapped out. The entire plan for Season 6 is great reading for fans, and it proves that Malozzi and company were ready to go had they gotten the green light.
Actor and writer Joe Flanagan is well known for his leading role in Stargate Atlantis as John Shepard, the eventual military commander of Atlantis. While Flanagan has been on our screens since Atlantis came to a close, Shepard remains the actor's most notable role on television. What fans may not know is that Flanagan actually tried to buy the Stargate franchise from MGM in an attempt to get Atlantis Season 6 made. Speaking at the Edmonton Expo in 2014, Flanagan revealed that he put together a group of investors and approached MGM amid the bankruptcy talk with his offer and got some good news in return. Flanagan explained, "The guy who ran MGM said, 'I can't let you buy the franchise. That would require a level of approval that we can't even muster up these days because we're going south. But I can maybe make an informal agreement to lease this thing on a 10-year lease.'"
That was a Hail Mary.
The actor planned on filming all 20 episodes in Europe, presumably the 20 episodes later shared by Malozzi, though that was never confirmed specifically.
Sadly, Flanagan's plans to get season 6 off the ground never came to fruition, and despite every attempt, they ultimately couldn't bring the show back to life.